I'm not usually much of a horror guy myself because I find that all too often modern horror movies just don't really work. Like so many comedy films that just aren't really that funny, so many horror movies just aren't all that scary, but with few exceptions. And usually, what makes a really good horror movie, much like a really good comedy, is that it has some kind of unique take, or it simply returns to a tried and tested format that has been discarded long ago. The idea of, don't overthink it, just give audiences what they're looking for, and ultimately keep it simple. Well, it seems despite many disappointing big budget releases of late, there's been some successes to speak of when it comes to the horror genre. When done right, horror can offer some surprise hits. Also, decent horror can achieve so much on a relatively low budget thanks to the genre relying so much on things like tension, suspense, atmosphere, pacing, and tone, which are more a product of filmmaking, directing, and acting ability rather than having to spend gazillions of dollars on visual effects. That's not to say there aren't many big budget horror movies, of course there are, and we're going to talk about a few of those. Now, Backrooms and Obsession were two low budget indie horror films that came out this year, and they both made hundreds of millions of dollars and really spoke to aspects of modern life and culture in different ways. But the bigger budget franchise film 28 years later, The Bone Temple, was a bit of a non-event for many people. It was considered broadly to be okay, middle of the road, and it ultimately failed at the box office. There's two noteworthy horror films coming out later this year. Both of them are part of big franchises. The first is a new Resident Evil film called Resident Evil, a reboot of the franchise, which is of course based on the video games of the same name. And the second notable horror movie coming out later this year is Clayface. And Clayface is a character who is actually a Batman villain. And the film is part of the James Gunn DCU. Now, to be honest, I'm not sure how exactly a film with this kind of tone is compatible with the colourful superhero films like Supergirl and Superman, but what do I know? The very idea of a unique, lesser-known supervillain from a well-known comic book movie genre in a horror setting is definitely an interesting proposition, and the film is managing to generate a great deal of audience goodwill and interest for that reason. Certainly, the reaction from the trailers has been very positive. And I think it's the novelty of this film featuring in a superhero genre that's part of the appeal. Really dark horror superhero movies of this kind aren't all that common. One that springs to mind is 2016's Split, which at the time no one realised was even part of a superhero franchise until it was revealed to be a stealth sequel to Unbreakable at the very end of that film. Yes, the less said about Glass, the better. I've already reviewed that film long ago. Horrendous ending. And then there's the Venom films, also comic book horror movies, but they're examples of big budget, special effects heavy action horror films. But Clayface is unique in the genre because its budget is relatively small by comparison at just $40 million. So its pathway to breaking even and making a profit should be much more straightforward than many superhero movies right now. So that leads us to the 2026 Resident Evil reboot film. It's due out in September, and its first trailer was released recently. Not bad by the looks of it. Very much a teaser trailer. This guy is a medical courier. He's delivering some organ to Raccoon City, and he has a car accident and is chased into a house by the dead woman he accidentally hit and killed with his car. As you'd expect, the film will obviously deal with the Umbrella Corporation and presumably an outbreak of the T-virus. The Resident Evil film series was a bit of a mixed bag. The first 6 films starring Mila Jovovich were okay. They didn't sit well with many fans of the game series because of how the films deviated from established lore. There were canonical departures, and of course, absent characters, and the action sequences were often over the top and just downright ridiculous. And that felt very divorced from the game's smaller tone. But the films worked well as mindless popcorn action horror films, which appealed to general audiences and helped the films into profitability. The 2021 reboot, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, was a bit of a missed opportunity because on paper it really should have worked. It finally gave fans a lot of what they were looking for. The locations were true to the games, making it feel like an authentic adaptation. It focused on small town Raccoon City and recreated the atmosphere of the first two games. And people loved seeing the Spencer Mansion, but many fans didn't like how the character of Leon Kennedy was written and portrayed, and the fact that the stories of the first two games were basically being squeezed together into one film. It didn't really do the stories of either game justice. The film was a box office failure. Ultimately, response was fairly mixed. But this was probably the first Resident Evil film that felt close enough in many ways to the original games. By comparison, this 2026 film is going to focus entirely on new characters, and in particular, one character's fight to survive across one single night, making it potentially a much more intense psychological thriller as well as a horror. The aim is to recreate the feel and tone of the Resident Evil games without relying too heavily on established characters and backstories. So this film is not trying to reinvent the wheel. It's trying to keep the formula simple, and horror films work best when they're kept simple, when subtlety and suspense are the priority. So I wish this film the very best of luck. Needless to say, horror has enjoyed a resurgence in 2026. And I'm even including the throwback screwball comedy horror Scary Movie in that list. And I think this resurgence is a symptom of audience fatigue for a lot of mainstream Hollywood genres and bigger franchises, which have begun to decline in popularity. Ultimately, audiences do need to be persuaded to get up off their couch and part with their hard-earned money at the cinema. I think they're looking for innovative and truly creative stories. And horror, as a genre, has proven time and time again that when it's done right, it can deliver that innovation. When it comes to the potential box office performance for both of these films, my prediction would be that they will both benefit from the momentum that the horror genre is enjoying right now. Hard to say where things will go for Resident Evil. That film has a budget of $80 million, but certainly Clayface, with a budget of only $40 million, is likely to be, relatively speaking, quite successful and quite profitable indeed. So yeah, that's going to do it for today, guys. I'm going to wrap this video up here. Let me know your thoughts on the trailers for this new Resident Evil film and also for Clayface. Are you looking forward to these films? Let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell to be notified of future updates as well. Share the video out there. Take care. Hit that like button and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.